Hello, folks, and welcome to Got Your Back NHL Post-Trade Deadline Edition. I'm Ryan Rashaw, getting set to be joined by Darren Dreger and Pierre LeBrun. We've got two of the insiders today on the podcast, going to debrief what was a crazy trade deadline day. Not exactly. Crazy trade deadline week. We're going to run down all the activity among the 7 Canadian teams and talk big winners and maybe who might have potentially missed out on this year's deadline with the fellas. Of course, Got Your Back NHL edition brought to you by Cross Country Canada Supplies and Rentals. They provide equipment and supplies to all facets of the Canadian construction industry, but what sets them apart is their get-her-done attitude. It's a core value of their company. Every one of their staff members lives by the get-her-done formula to ensure they never let their customer down. They will bend over backwards to get their clientele what they need when they need it. No excuses. Cross Country Canada takes great pride in that formula, and we are very proud to have them as title sponsors here on Got Your Back. As we say, fine morning to the gents. Dregs, you want to get any chirps out of the way right away here? Anything?
No, I'm all good.
Oh, no, you're good?
Yeah, all good. No worries.
He's got to go shovel, so let's go.
Yeah. Hey, listen, I heard you guys got hit by an absolute doozy. How's everybody doing? And Pierre, the way you were describing it to me, Pierre, like this was a rare storm that you guys got hit with last night.
Yeah, it was scary, man. Thunder and lightning and snow. I've never been part of that. I know we've had a few storms around North America this year, but there was a crazy one in Buffalo, of course, that had some tragedy involved earlier this year, but it was crazy in Southern Ontario. Yeah, last night. Ooh, weird way to end a crazy long day.
Yeah.
Sure.
How much shoveling you have, Drags? Like you probably a fair amount of digging out, I would imagine, this morning.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, we probably got close to just a foot and a half. I mean, up here in Brooklyn, Ontario. So it's going to be a bit of an ordeal. And what always pisses me off is, you know, the snow plow. I mean, obviously, you know, by the time they get to neighborhoods like mine, they've got to clear the main thoroughfares and things like that. But you just comfortably get everybody shoveled out and snow plowed out, and everybody in the neighborhood's good. And then here comes Mr. Snowplow bombing down the street, and you've got another 4-foot ridge to deal with. But you know what? Now the trade deadline's over. I can leave my phone on the countertop. Yeah, and go out stress-free. And if it takes me 3 hours, it takes me 3 hours. So yeah, I'm not worried about it.
So I do have to say, watching from a distance yesterday, and on a day like that where the Oilers make exactly 0 moves, that's the market I cover. So I'm in Edmonton. I got my feet up, watching the show. And I do have to say, you guys, for a trade deadline where there wasn't nearly as much action on actual trade deadline day, you guys actually did a pretty good job of entertaining people. That was a long time to be on TV with not much happening. It kills me to say this because it's nothing but chirps at me here, but you guys did a good job. There's some funny stuff on that show. Like
let's be clear. Dregs and I have nothing to do with the entertainment.
No, nothing.
We were in the corner grinding.
No, I know. But the whole field, I don't know, was it just me? Or was it? I just found it really entertaining between the video and Bruce Boudreau and his presence there yesterday. I don't know, boys. I thought it was pretty good, Dregs.
Yeah, no, it was entertainment. And Pierre is right. I mean, it has nothing to do with us as the trade breakers. This is all the brainchild of James Duthie and Mike Lane and all those who contribute on the production side of things and the editorial, of course. I wouldn't call it a regret. Pierre LeBrun participated. So we were both in the James Duthie song, which Brett Kissel was kind enough to put a professional spin on it after the fact. But that was full quota for me of shenanigans and nonsense. So they invited me to be part of the Bruce Boudreau rant, the remake of the famous rant back in the day of the Washington Capitals. I'm like, I'm not doing that. I said, the only way I'll do it is if Bobby Mack comes out of semi-retirement and he participates. And they asked Bob, and he's like, I can't even say what he said. But anyway, it was a hard no. So in hindsight,
you should have done that.
I should have. I mean, it was
glad I did it. It was fun.
Done. Yeah, it was
that is weak, Dregs. Why did you back away from that? You were worried he was going to say something mean to you? Like, why not?
Because
who has a chance to get yelled at by Bruce Boudreau?
Well, I didn't want to be part of the circus act. I mean, it was, but in
tell you
saying
what.
that, it was so well executed.
Yeah.
And Bruce,
So good.
like he needs to stop coaching, whether he has a choice or not, and focus maybe more on acting, because that was first rate, man. That was worthy of award.
And having been there when we were taping it, obviously, I can tell you that took no time to put together. It was really well done by the crew, obviously. But Boudreau nailed, I think he only took 3 takes
to do the whole thing.
The main part of it. I had to do a couple takes at the end when I was supposed to say "Let's go" because I'm such a terrible actor. But Boudreau, the main star, was so flawless that I was like, okay, we have it. But the highlight of that skit, by far, as I tweeted last night, is the acting chops of Gino Reda.
He was good.
Sitting on the floor.
He was good. I do have to say. And I've seen him try and do some other acting stuff in little things that we've done here and there. And he's like, he's more kind of in your category, Dregs. Pretty crappy at it. Yeah. But he was really good on that one. Star of the day, though, O-Dog's performance in that video was, that was ridiculous.
Across the board, though, right? Like, not just the video, like the mock draft lottery and all the stuff. People don't realize, obviously anybody who listens to Overdrive gets a real good dose of the personality of Jeff O'Neill and Brian Hayes and Jamie Noodles McLennan. But O is just so talented in so many different ways. It's almost like the analysis from the former hockey player is secondary because of how creative he is.
Yeah. Okay, enough patting ourselves on the back. Let's talk big winners and maybe who was a little more docile on trade deadline day. Let's break it down. Courtesy our new friends at Kuma Outdoor Gear. Thrilled to have them on board as new sponsors. How about that logo? That logo is absolutely fire. They've got a wide range of gear to fit all your outdoor needs. From super high quality camping chairs, so comfortable and luxurious. Did you know they come heated? I found that out. Definitely going to be grabbing one of those. Tents, sleeping bags, travel games, pet products, drinkware. There's no reason to be any less comfortable outside than you are in your living room, and Kuma will help make sure of that. It's available across North America. Go to kumaoutdoorgear.com to find a luxury retailer near you. Kuma Outdoor Gear, experience luxury outdoors. And there's a couple of fellas with cottages and summer homes. I would think maybe some Kuma Outdoor Gear might be in order for around your campfires and on the deck and such, boys, Dregs.
Oh, 100%. That's why as soon as you mentioned the logo, that is a very cool logo. Yeah. And then you start talking about the merchandise and everything that's available there. Yeah. I probably got about 200 feet of beach.
Yep.
My lake property in Manitoba. So I've had a couple of conversations, not just about the gear. I'm also now shopping for like a tractor. I need a tractor.
Oh, I don't know if they do.
Does Kuma sell tractors? Can they get me a tractor?
I don't think they do. I should, but we could probably. I am in Western Canada. I could probably land a tractor sponsor if you want. I can see if John Deere awesome. If you're out there.
No, Kubota, Coyote.
Kubota, whatever you need. Yeah. All right. Well, I'll save this segment and we'll get at it. Okay, boys. Let's talk about big winners, and I think the Boston Bruins of all the teams that made a splash. I don't know if they're the most surprising winner because here they are, just a dominant team this year, Pierre, yet their general manager identifies a couple of needs, but he seizes opportunity, right, with players that get hurt and some space that opened up. Now, you can do too much sometimes, and you could argue that Boston, did they need to do as much as they did, but he struck, and some significant adds, Orlov, Hathaway, Bertuzzi, real activity there from Don Sweeney, Pierre.
Well, and how about how Bobby Orlov has played since he arrived in Boston?
Am I the only one that doesn't love that? That feels blasphemous or something. I don't know.
The aggressiveness in both those moves are interesting because, as most people know by now, the Bruins were in pretty deep with Columbus on Vladislav Gavrikov, and then, we'll never know the full story, but Columbus thought they were 90% there towards the deal, and what happened is Washington put out a note, Brian McClellan, to all the other GMs on Sunday, February 19th, and said, "I'm listening on Dmitry Orlov." Don Sweeney did a complete 90-degree turn, and went after Orlov the rest of the week. Got him on the Wednesday or the Thursday. And then the Bertuzzi trade, is that's a trade that probably never happens except for Taylor Hall and Nick Foligno getting injured. And clearly that's what he's saying. I'm not letting anything escape here. I want to give this group every chance they have to win the cup this year. So he spends the 2024 first to get Bertuzzi. He would have liked to have kept his 24 first, but those are not short-term injuries. So he goes out and fixes that within 24 hours. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I agree with that. Clearly the Boston Bruins are all in, and a great team just got that much better. Now they're going to have to prove it in a ridiculous Eastern Conference. But, from a player perspective, and I know we're going to get there eventually, I'm not going to mention any of the other teams, but I would think that as an NHL player, if you're on a playoff-worthy team right now, you're probably looking somewhat in jealousy at what Don Sweeney did and what some of these other general managers did, right? Because all you want is, number one, a chance to lock down a playoff spot, and then for your general manager to insulate you as best he can. And there were some big deals and some interesting deals and teams that got better, but Boston is ready to top a class for sure.
So I was having a chat with somebody close to the league yesterday, and one of the things that was brought up, and I've been thinking about it since it was mentioned, when was the last time that a team made a big splash at the deadline? Like, we're talking big splash, one or two of the top names and real big additions and such, and actually ended up taking those additions and hoisting a Stanley Cup with them. Is this the year where that mold is going to be broken? Because it feels like it doesn't happen very often. Yeah. Where major players at deadline, it actually, like a big rental or a huge ad, ends up in a Stanley Cup, Dregs. It feels like it doesn't happen very often, but the number of teams that made a splash this year, it feels like that mold's going to be broken this year.
No, that's fair. And look, I mean, if we go back to Boston here again, I guess you could challenge, could Dmitry Orlov be a key element to that team winning a Stanley Cup, or Bertuzzi, or even Garnet Hathaway was not a throw-in in this deal. This is a very effective bottom six forward. So, I could see that group, the combination, the meshing of the Boston Bruins. So it's a bit of a challenge to suggest that the deadline acquisitions are going to be the difference makers. But then you look at the New York Rangers, you look at Tarasenko, and you look at Patrick Kane, and I think all of us are trying to decide how they're going to split the puck in New York, especially on the power play with all of the offensive weapons that they have. I mean, Gerard Gallant is going to be a mad scientist with a chemistry experiment here until the end of the regular season. But I'm always reminded, and you guys are as well, to your point, Ryan, when you look at the teams that have won the Stanley Cup, it's always about the core. And if your core guys don't step up and perform like the Tampa Bay Lightning have in the last 3-4 years, then chances are you're not hoisting that Stanley Cup. So it's going to be interesting. Boston may challenge that theory.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to overrate what the deadline can do to decide a cup champion, but I do think, what Tampa proved a number of years in a row, go back to adding Coleman and Goudreau before their first cup, and then adding David Savard and adding Nick Paul and Brandon Hagel last year. It's not like the Lightning is sitting on their hands either at the deadline every year. And this year, Tanner Jeannot and Tampa Bay Lightning don't even have to rent hotel space at the NHL draft for the next 5 years. But, in Colorado last year, again, not splashy to your point, Ryan, but Lehkonen, who scores 2 series clinching goals, including in the Cup final. Yeah. And Josh Manson and Andrew Cogliano. So I would argue still that the last few Cup champions have been assertive at the trade deadline. But to your point, I mean, we're talking Kane and Tarasenko in New York. Yeah. I mean, Tarasenko can't even play on the top line now. It's nuts. He's a major trade deadline ad. So, it'll be interesting for sure how, to Greg's point, how Gerard Gallant decides to dole that out. That's the team, when I talk to other front offices, that's the team where they're like, that's either going to be spectacular, or they're just not going to be able to mesh. And I don't know if anyone can answer that now.
Of all of the big additions, I mean, we could argue Timo Meier, the best player to change hands in the moment at this year's deadline, and goes from the San Jose Sharks to the New Jersey Devils. This is a significant add to their, not just this season. This wasn't a rental, Dregs. This is a major add for this organization that wants to take what they've accomplished this year and firmly grab a toehold on taking an even bigger step in the playoffs.
Yeah, look, I mean, when we try and analyze and then rate winners, losers of trades, doesn't it always come down to, okay, who got the best player? And in this case, there's no question that the New Jersey Devils got the best forward available, this trade season, and that is Timo Meier. And honorable mention should go to Tom Fitzgerald for grabbing a real popular and competitive bottom six guy in Curtis Lazar from the Vancouver Canucks. I mean, he is going to fit seamlessly into that room and into the forward core for Lindy Ruff and the New Jersey Devils. And on top of that, as Fitzy acknowledged in his post-deadline media availability, he's already working on contract extensions. He openly talked about, the initial conversations with Jesper Bratt and his agent, and they're waiting for a response there. And you don't make a trade the magnitude that he made with Mike Greer and the San Jose Sharks unless you're fully committed to extending Timo Meier. So this isn't just about deadline ads for Tom Fitzgerald and the New Jersey Devils. This is about turning this team into a Stanley Cup contender for, I would say, a few years, if not a handful of years to come.
Yeah, with all due respect to Patrick Kane and Ryan O'Reilly and a few others, it's not even close. Timo Meier is the most impactful addition in this deadline period because he's 26, because he's going to be around, as Dreg said, potentially be around if he signs an extension. And he's a rare commodity in today's NHL, as you guys know. He's a power forward. He's
big dude. He
can basically do it all, and man, he just fits into the hole that the Tom Fitzgerald had in his lineup. And as impactful as he may be for New Jersey, that's the gut punch to the Carolina Hurricanes, who have the second best record in the NHL. People were down on the Hurricanes yesterday. They didn't do anything on deadline day. That's not the part that I think frustrates Carolina. They didn't see a whole lot on the market yesterday. The gut punches, they went in hard on Timo Meier, offered 6 different pieces in a package last weekend.
Wow. And
got a call late last Saturday night, exactly 7 days ago, saying they were out. That was the gut punch for Carolina.
And so that they were going to be my next topic here, just in terms of teams that are right in the mix, who, frankly, didn't keep up in that arms race that we saw. And whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing that they, didn't overdo it. What was the fallback position, Pierre? Because teams don't go in with one guy in mind and nothing else possible after that. So what happened to the fallback positions?
Yeah, so keep in mind, too, that there are parameters that Carolina works with that are a little different than other contenders. They don't want to give up a first-round pick for a high-price rental. They just haven't done that under Tom Dundon. They were ready, obviously, to give up a lot for Timo Meier because he wasn't a rental, but then it came into the rentals. They want to get in on medium-price rentals, and yeah, they talked to Chicago about Max Domi. They talked to Detroit about Tyler Bertuzzi on on Wednesday night. So they were in on all those different pieces, but at a certain price because they were rentals and ended up getting boxed out. And could have done a few other things yesterday on deadline day, and just they like their team. And I understand that they didn't replace Max Pacioretty. They also only got 5 games out of Max Pacioretty, which is too bad. We send Pacioretty the best in his recovery. But the Hurricanes are second in the league with the lineup that they have right now. So we'll see. I mean, does it end up biting them? Maybe. But I also think, they went out last night and obviously beat up a bad Arizona team. But, maybe we're overdoing the idea that Carolina was left out here in the East.
Yeah. I struggle with being critical of Don Waddell and the approach here, too, because when you look at the construction and makeup of the Carolina Hurricanes, it's not like you can just plug a player in. James Van Riemsdyk obviously didn't get traded by the Philadelphia Flyers. And Ray Ferraro and I talked about this on the podcast last night. His view is the Carolina Hurricanes needed somebody who can just shoot the puck in the net. Well, Van Riemsdyk is capable of doing just that. He still has nifty hands for a big man, even though, he was never a great skater, but he doesn't skate as good as he once did. Let's put it that way. And for me, that's the obvious trigger point, and that's the reason why, Carolina didn't engage on a player like JVR, who was top of our trade bait list. I mean, you got to play the way that Rod Brind'Amour has designed this team to play, and you have to be able to skate. So why throw an asset at a piece and money at a piece it just isn't going to work with the dynamic that you have. So I still think the Canes are a terrific team, and there's no reason to question their ability to contend.
And they could have got in on some other hockey deals, I know, that would have been pretty interesting, but teams wanted to talk about Martin Necas or Seth Jarvis.
Right.
And that was just, Don Waddell was not in that.
Okay, let's get to running down the Canadian teams. So we'll call this segment Cross Country in honor of our sponsors. But this segment will be brought to you by Liberty Smart Security, a company that specializes in having your back. Over there. High quality advanced security systems for your home or your business. Liberty Smart Security uses leading edge technology to protect the things that you value most in life. Your home is your castle. So why not protect it with a Liberty Smart Security system? I've been protecting my home with one for the last 7 years, and it's fantastic technology, and I absolutely love it.
You know what? You botched that, so
yeah, I did.
I'm going to give a full shout out to Liberty Smart Security, and if they were available in Brooklyn, Ontario, Canada, and maybe they are.
They are.
Do some investigating.
Yeah, buddy, they're
there you go. Because
now we're really watching it.
Yeah, my security coverage here isn't great. So thank you, Liberty Smart Security.
Okay, you could do the ad read next time, Dregs. They would actually like that. They would probably pay more for you to do the ad reads here on the podcast. So your rate stays the same, by the way. Okay, guys, let's talk about the 7 Canadian teams. Let's start out in Vancouver. Is there a story there? What was the story of the Canucks, or the untold story, or what
Come on, Dregs. Come on, Dregs.
Dregs, Pierre, what's going on, boys?
Hey, it's interesting that I was trending at one point on Twitter yesterday for all of the reporting that went on around the Vancouver Canucks.
And you were sitting beside me on set. You had your pants on, so I don't know why you were trending. But, yeah.
And look, I mean, I wasn't alone in the reporting of what was going on with Vancouver. There's some other people that were deeply involved and had the story as deeply as I did too. Very little interest in Brock Besser, and I don't think anybody should be surprised with the cap hit and the term remaining. That'll be a summer deal. But what created the buzz was, the discussions that Vancouver was having with the Pittsburgh Penguins on JT Miller. Now, I played right into Patrick Allvin's hands in his post-media availability, because if you want to play the game of semantics, did Pittsburgh actually firmly offer something concrete on JT Miller? I mean, I didn't participate in that conversation between Hextall and Patrick Allvin, but they certainly had deep conversation about the parameters of what something might look like. Now, I mean, did Penguins ownership get involved? Did that muddy it up? Was Vancouver talking to other clubs? Pierre is going to chime in on that. I mean, there were all sorts of permutations of how this could have worked. But part of the reason why the Vancouver Canucks pushed away is because they moved Bo Horvat a few weeks back. And to move JT Miller, what do they do at center ice? I mean, they're not throwing in the towel entirely. This is a team in transition that is trying to be much better as early as next season. So JT Miller would have been a real nice cap relief, or Brock Besser for the Vancouver Canucks, but both those men will be revisited in the offseason.
Yeah, and this is why I think it's going to be difficult for the Canucks to totally put a lid on this story, because it just involved too many parties. And I get it. There probably wasn't a firm offer, but there are a lot of conceptual things thrown around between Pittsburgh and Vancouver from what we can tell, including the fact that we know that the Canucks reached out to a couple of teams and said, would you be interested in taking player X that we might get from Pittsburgh to make all this cap stuff work here in a three-way trade? And obviously none of that happened, but those conversations did. And again, they probably didn't get deep enough for this to become a bigger headline, but let's not pretend that these conversations didn't happen.
And look, just to put a bow on this, because we got to move on to the other Canadian teams, but I think what upset Patrick Allvin, I know, was that it got out. Right? That it was just such an open forum of discussion for all the reporting and the media. And you know what, frankly, a decent part of our analysis and conversation on live television. I can appreciate that. I mean, isn't that the juice though, around this time of year? The deals that don't happen.
Yeah.
That's part of it.
Well, I was going to ask. Sometimes that's the real juicy stuff. Is there anything else that you guys could talk about that almost happened that didn't? Like any other?
Well,
What about JVR to
Greg
Detroit?
broke the story earlier this week, but it bears revisiting, especially since it's in your market, Ryan. But let's not pretend that it wasn't close that Jacob Chikrin ended up in Edmonton.
Yeah.
I wrote about this in The Athletic too, but it's fascinating to me the way Ken Holland had parallel tracks and parallel conversations happening for at the same time with Nashville and Arizona, and deep with both on Ekholm and Chikrin at the same time, and was trying to figure out which one he was going to bring across the finish line. I mean, he phoned David Poile last Thursday, February 23rd, and said, "What does it take to get in on Ekholm?" And David Poile said, "Schaefer for sure. First round pick, and then we'll figure out the rest." So he knew last week that was the starting point. And that was tough to hear. Those are big pieces. But in the meantime, he went 2 straight weeks on again, off again with Bill Armstrong on Jacob Chikrin, and leading up to the sort of Monday, Tuesday, almost getting a deal done and everything blowing up. And as Dreger reported. So that's fascinating to me, is that it really came down, I think, almost to a flip of a coin between Chikrin and Ekholm for the Oilers.
Dregs, do you feel like, and we'll transition here to the Oilers, but just quickly on Arizona, from 18 months ago, asking price, the things we hear, to where this thing actually landed, it feels like a mishandle by Armstrong here to me. It feels like an overplayed hand. I don't know if that's being too hard on him or not, but when you look at what the return actually ended up being, it feels like a guy that's reasonably new in the position overplayed his hand a bit.
I think that's accurate to say he overplayed his hand. Mishandle at the end of the day. He got a decent package from the Ottawa Senators. And, the Ottawa Senators are playing really good hockey. And Jake Chikrin is going to be a part of whether or not they actually claw fully back into playoff contention. So the jury is still out on that draft pick. But it was draft location that ultimately enticed Armstrong to close with the Ottawa Senators. But, overplayed. To ask what he asked for, I can appreciate that, because you've got, on most teams, Jake Chikrin is a top 3 defenseman, right? And on a lot of teams, he's a top pairing defenseman. And he had term. So I think we can all understand why, he was holding out for the package. Here's where it gets dicey for me, though, fellas. The way that he overplayed the hand smells like the player asked for a trade. So he's like, all right, well, you want to trade, that's fine, but I'm going to get exactly what I need for this organization, or I'm not going to make that. That's not what happened here. That's not what happened. November 2021, Arizona goes to Jake Chikrin. Hey, guess what? We're rebuilding again. You want to be part of it? Let's go.
Right.
Or you want to be traded to a contender? We'll facilitate that. And Chikrin, appreciably said, no, I'd rather be traded to a contender. So the Coyotes initiated the process. And
that's not the common narrative out there, Dregs. I don't think that's the common narrative out there, that it was them that initiated it, right? I think a lot of people just figure he asked for a trade.
And that's not accurate. He did not ask for a trade. Exactly. They went to him. Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
There's no question that in the end, the price softened. Ottawa a week earlier was out of it, and then they end up back in because suddenly their prospects don't have to be in the deal. But the one thing I'll say to Bill Armstrong's defense, and he can't come out and talk about this because for obvious reasons, but he had tremendous pressure from above him to not take money back in the Chikrin deal at the end of the day, which really, first of all, it killed the Oilers deal in the end, that's part of the reason. But he could have made some different types of trades involving Jacob Chikrin if he could have taken some contracts back. Let's be honest here. So that played into Ottawa, the fact they can just take the deal and not even send a contract back. And don't forget, Arizona had a deal in place with Columbus at the draft in Montreal last July. I'm glad we're back on the right calendar. But and that, in the end, it's interesting, just draft pick wise. The pick that was in that deal fell apart because Chikrin basically, I think, didn't want to go to Columbus. But the pick they would have gotten that deal was 12th overall from Columbus. It was Columbus' second pick in that first round. And so 12 is what they would have had. And now they end up with the Ottawa pick, which will be anywhere from 6 to Well, I don't know. It depends, right? I mean, if they make the playoffs.
Could be juicy.
Yeah. So my point is they may have ended up with a similar first-round pick, as it turns out, than Columbus would have given them last summer.
Yeah, back to just finish up the thought on Edmonton. I wonder how close a consultation do you think it looks like with Connor McDavid when management is looking at making a deal of that significance? And in particular, one involving trading Tyson Barrie out, who obviously McDavid's really tight with. Barrie's a really important part of that locker room. And I'm not saying that this is special treatment for Connor McDavid, because I think you consult leadership groups on moves that affect the chemistry and leadership in the room. But I don't know, Dregs, how close do you think that consultation is with McDavid?
Yeah, it would have been pretty close. I mean, Kenny basically has an open door policy, and he likes to, talk to Connor a fair bit, and Bob Nicholson likes to talk to Connor and Leon a fair bit. Did he run by the final tally? Probably not. Mm-hmm. I can't imagine, though, that those two players, especially the leaders of the Oilers, wouldn't know that Tyson Barrie was included in that. And guys, we all lived it, right? We lived it firsthand. That was 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes of pure hell, because the Oilers and some involved in this process didn't want to acknowledge the trade officially out of respect to Tyson Barrie and out of respect to everything that was going on around that organization. So, Connor wouldn't have sign off. I mean, no player does, but Connor's no different than Sidney Crosby, aside from the decorated resume, which he may get to one day. Mm-hmm. I mean, you do as general manager go to your leaders and say, here's what we're thinking. Just popular teammate Ryan, as you know, it was a tough one for those guys to have to deal with.
Yeah, and you know better than me, Ryan, but obviously Tyson Barrie really popular with those guys.
Yeah.
He was almost traded last summer. We talked about this.
Yeah.
The Oilers had a bit of a dance on John Klingberg where if they could have got Montreal to sign him and flip him, Tyson Barrie goes to Montreal. And anyway, none of that happened, but there were certainly conversations about that last August.
There you go.
And quick aside, you're just wrap that one up too. I had an exchange with Matt Duchene soon after that deal happened with the Preds, and he was like, "Oh boy!"
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they're best friends dating back to Colorado, and the offensive connection between Barrie and Duchene would be pretty obvious. So he was celebrating quietly.
And by the way, I talked to someone with the Preds management. Tyson Barrie's not just some guy they had to take to make the math work. That Nashville is excited about having Tyson Barrie because the Predators aren't going into a 10-year rebuild here. They want to be competitive as soon as possible, and you see Tyson Barrie as part of that.
Good early returns for the Oilers. Matthias Ekholm, for a guy that had to pick his life up and move into a different country and play 2 games in 3 nights, he's been excellent in both of the Oiler games. And the other guy that's been really good is Evan Bouchard, who's his new partner. And I just think that for Bouchard to have a veteran next to him now, like he did last year in Duncan Keith.
Part of the deal. That's part of why they made that deal. Ekholm was a good fit for that reason.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's move on to the other Alberta team, the Calgary Flames. They do an odd deal where they swap brothers. That's a bit of an odd one. In Nick Ritchie and Brett Ritchie swapping over. Stetcher comes in as well. Dryden Hunt. This is some nibbling around the edges here, Dregs. Not a lot of activity out of Brad Treliving.
No, he's stuck, man. Out of respect to Brad, you can't be critical because what do you add to that group? The heavy lifting was done in the offseason in filling the holes they had to fill. Hold on a second. Yeah, filling the holes they had to fill. I just had to cough, shocking. Mm-hmm. But based on where they're at in the standings, what was he going to do? I mean, there were conversations with Montreal and Joel Edmondson and, I'm sure other pieces around the National Hockey League. But honestly, it's where the Flames are in their fight, which isn't much of a fight right now when you analyze, how many last 10, 15, 20, maybe the season. they can't grab hold of consistency. So I think Tree's hands were tied in doing something more significant here.
I mean, we don't have enough time. I find the Calgary Flames one of the most fascinating situations in the NHL right now. You got the GM on an expiring contract. You got the coach who just got signed to an extension. You got a team that's in no man's land in the standings, can't buy, but can't sell. And I know some people might look at it and say, well, St. Louis and Nashville started selling, and they're just a few points behind Calgary. You can't sell when you just acquired, Huberdeau and Uyghur and sign them to extensions. Like, this is you're still in your window now. You're pot committed. And in fact, this offseason has to be adding more to it. So it's a terrible position to be in at the deadline. And Calgary did exactly what they should do, which is nothing. I mean, that was the right call.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's frustrating, but.
Can I wrap two teams into one here? Because Calgary to me, different place, but somewhat similar to the future of the Winnipeg Jets here, right? Now, Winnipeg is marginally ahead of them, clearly in the standings in a wild card spot.
For now.
But if you want to look at some compelling storylines, look at those two teams in the West, those two Canadian teams in the offseason. Is Brad Treliving coming back as general manager?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's any question Daryl Sutter will be back on the bench. We all know the relationship with ownership in Calgary, all of that. What is that roster going to look like? In Winnipeg, they added some interesting pieces, but they've wrestled with injury all season long, and that's going to be problematic for them. But then what do you do with Pierre-Luc Dubois? There's always speculation around the future of Mark Scheifele in Winnipeg. And trust me, fellas, when I tell you, if those two pieces are shifted out of Winnipeg, guess what the next conversation we're having is about? Connor Hellebuck. Holy smokes. This could be an offseason of pure upheaval for the Winnipeg Jets. And, it's you don't have to have a pristine crystal ball to see something similar in Calgary.
I saw them play last night here in Edmonton, and it's disjointed, and it wasn't good. Like they've gone the wrong way fast here, Pierre.
I feel for the Jets because the dynamics are so much harder for that organization that they built something really good. A lot of players don't want to sign there. Like their margin for error is so different than a lot of teams. They're not the only one. I mean, you could argue that for a lot of Canadian teams, but as Dreger just said, I mean, this offseason, let's let the rest of the year play out first. As we always say, the playoffs have a way of overriding any other narrative because it really forces the hand of management. But oh my goodness, it could be a domino there in Winnipeg from Dubois on down for sure. It'd be interesting.
That wraps Winnipeg and Calgary. By the way, I want to put a final thought on the Calgary Flames. An emotional Brad Treliving yesterday in his press conference, sending his best to Assistant General Manager Chris Snow and his wife Kelsey, their entire family. Really moving emotional stuff, and we also send our best to the Snow family. Continue to be inspiring in their fight. Of course, Chris, just in a grind, battling hard against ALS, but continue to inspire people, guys, by being so public and letting people in on their struggles to raise awareness.
So you know what? We get so focused on what we're trying to do in breaking trades and analyze the deals on deadline day. And, the adrenaline push there is so fleeting, right? With social media, I mean, you break a trade, you get 15 seconds of fame. That's it. And then somebody's coming in. So I don't know what time of the day it was. It was probably around midday here in Ontario where Kelsey Snow tweeted the update that Chris was back in hospital. Yeah. And I got to tell you, that was a real jolt for me. Just a recognition of, hey, we're here. And Ryan, you touched on it right off the top of the podcast. That was, again, a slap in the face for me to go, hey, smarten up. Like, you're taking this day way too seriously. This is about entertainment. This is about making sure that, our viewers are having a good time. And we're going to break some trades. But, considering what's going on with the Snows, that was a big wake-up call for me, and I needed it. I needed it at that point.
Yeah. Pretty inspiring stuff. And I know, Pierre, it's also very close to your heart as well. And that's, they're being so upfront with their journey and with their struggles in an effort to raise awareness. And I just really appreciate and respect that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to the Montreal Canadiens. This might be a little bit of a short one. We got Montreal and Ottawa left here. Just Patrick Alvin, we saw what they did. They were active, in and around the draft. They did, they made some additions back then, but really, I'm looking at the list here, and they're just outside of Gurianov and the Donoff swap. What do you think about the tactics employed by the Canadiens, Pierre?
Yeah, I think you said Patrick Alvin, my friend, but you meant Ken Hughes.
Sorry. Yes, Ken Hughes. My apologies.
But that's okay. We all make mistakes.
Nice correction.
It's early, Albert. Come on.
Yeah. You know what? The deadline has to come to you, right? And it wasn't from a lack of trying, but there were teams that were so curious to watch Joel Edmondson play late Thursday night in LA because he hadn't played in 5 or 6 weeks. But let's be real, one game. I mean, did he get a number of calls on Joel Edmondson yesterday? Yes. And my sense of the nature of those calls was a lot of questions about Joel Edmondson's back. So, listen, at the end of the day, this wasn't a must for the Montreal Canadiens to have to trade him. They love him in their room. He's got another year in his deal. They can see what the market's like for him at the draft in Nashville, or they can bring him back next year and redo all this again at the deadline next year. So lots of options there. They like the player. They were just going to trade him if there was a certain price met. And outside of that, I mean, there was, next to no interest in Jonathan Drew. And then that's just a guy that obviously has been in and out of the lineup. And it was great to see Drew score, by the way, his first goal of the year. I mean, that meant a lot, I think, to a lot of players on that team for him. But there just wasn't, the deadline didn't come. Sean Monahan injured. The deadline just didn't come to Kent Hughes.
Right. And Kent is such a smart guy with a tremendous background, the success that he had as a player agent with, Hall of Fame players, let's be honest. I think if there was a misstep, if he could have a mulligan, he might go back to a comment that he made relatively early in the year. And this was just looking forward to the season and where the Montreal Canadiens are. And he acknowledged that he'd like to have 3 first-round picks in the draft. Well, at the time he said it, Sean Monahan is healthy and he's thinking that and playing great. He's thinking Hughes, that is, okay, well, Monahan might fetch me a first at the deadline. And just through a crazy string of injuries, all the pieces that Ken Hughes would have preferred to have in play just didn't have any market value. So, he's not done yet. He's a crafty guy. He's got a great mentor there in Jeff Gorton. So those guys, they know how to build winning teams. So I expect the Montreal Canadiens are going to make some noise in the offseason pretty early.
And just to put a finishing point on Sean Monahan and his agent Pat Morris will have a say in this. But I think what the Habs will try and do is actually sign Monahan to a 1-year deal probably at the end of the year.
Yeah, why not?
So that the asset, you're first of all, they like him. He's meshed in with that group. But then you can do this all over again, next year.
Been an up-and-down season for the Ottawa Senators, but here they sit the day after trade deadline, 66 points, chasing that second wildcard spot, currently owned by the New York Islanders, 4 points ahead, but the Sens have a bunch of games in hand. They're very much in the mix here, and Pierre Dorion Dregs laid in the weeds, lying in the weeds waiting, and then pounced on one of the bigger names on the market. And this was a hockey deal that improved his team, not just now, but for the next couple of seasons. I thought it was really shrewd patience from Dorion.
Yeah, you could say that. I wonder if he's going to have to get the horseshoe surgically removed. Because that's kind of the way it boiled down. And look,
more luck than skill here, you're saying? That's what I'm hearing?
Let's be honest. I mean, Dorion, and he acknowledged this, right?
Mm-hmm.
He promised Claude Giroux when they signed him that he was going to bring in a top pairing, top 3 defenseman. Well, that's in the off season. So look. Senators are a good team. There's so much turmoil there with pending ownership change and all of that. But you watch their games now. Brady Tkachuk is a beast out there, and they've got the elements of a team that is going to be a really good hockey club for a long time. So I'm not being critical of Pierre. Billy Armstrong wanted 2 first-round picks in either Ridley Gregg or the goaltender Matt Sogard. Nobody's making that deal. That there was no stress for Pierre Dorion to turn that down. Everybody would turn that deal down. So the market crumbles and Jake Chikrin falls into his lap. So to play devil's advocate here, which is why I started with the smart Alec comment on the horseshoe. What if the Ottawa Senators can't quite claw their way back in and they end up missing the playoffs by 2-3 points?
And the pick is 6.
But can you not build a case that if Dorion had fulfilled the promise in the offseason and started the year with a defensive core that was strong enough, maybe you're a playoff lock at this point. Maybe you're a
Right.
playoff lock. Now, that's harsh and that's critical in trying to look back, but there are some who will do that because he did fulfill the promise, but it took him a long time to do it.
I mean, I'll credit that, you know, he told Bill Armstrong that he was out of it a week before, which might have been a bit of a play, right? I'm not in this. You're asking for Ridley Gregg. You're asking for too many pieces. Go make your deal elsewhere. Bill Armstrong tried to make his deal elsewhere, as we covered with Edmonton. So in that way, you know, was that a ruse? I mean, did Pierre Dorion play that craftily, or is it still more the fact that no one else could, no one else could make a deal without sending contracts back?
Right.
Except for Ottawa, really.
We need Bobby's cowbell. Ding, 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 ding.
Was there going to be another deal if Ottawa didn't get him? Was bringing in a defenseman, and not that there was a ton left on the market, but was there going to be something else if it wasn't Chychrun?
I think he would have had to. No, but I think he would have probably gone, bargain shopping at that point. I mean, look, you're looking at Eric Brandstrom now, being a healthy scratch, and they move out Nikita Zaitsev. I mean, unless they're bringing up Bernard Docker from the American League, they would have needed another defenseman. I think it just changed so quickly and in such a good way for the Ottawa Senators when the Chychrun scenario started to unfold that obviously the shopping was over.
All right, that's a wrap on our cross-country segment brought to you by Liberty Smart Security. And I think that'll be a wrap on the podcast, guys. Thanks for taking some time after a crazy busy day yesterday to run it all down. We'll let you guys grab the shovels and go start digging out of that tough snowfall you guys had last night.
Hey, by the way, I was a little disappointed. The other TSN reporters cross-country were like having fun, and
I had fun.
Eating chicken wings and all that stuff.
I did fun things on my hits.
Did you? I didn't see any of them.
Well, that's because you tune out when I start talking. This is the problem. You're sick and tired of me.
Pitbull meat wagon. That's what that is.
What did Bruce Boudreau think of my performance yesterday, Dregs? Go ahead.
Nah, he just recognized that you can talk. You talk a lot.
Man, that guy can talk.
That guy can talk.
We didn't even talk about the tanking teams, though.
Oh, do you want to?
No, that's good.
Yeah, Dregs, your performance on that keyboard, you had one shot in that entire video. That's how bad you were. It was like a 5-minute song. You two clowns had one shot each. That's all the airtime you could get.
That's a bad scoop because James Duthie acknowledged after the fact they were shocked at how good my timing was, and I didn't even know the song. So
no,
bad information,
buddy. I would hate to see you at a wedding on a dance floor. You're one of those guys that has painfully bad rhythm. I can just tell. You can just tell. You kind of do this anytime you have to dance. You're like, woo. You turn into. Yeah. That's gross. Never again. All right, boys. Have a great Saturday. Thanks kindly.
All right, guys. Thanks.
All right, that'll wrap up the podcast. Big thanks to our sponsors, Cross Country Canada Supplies and Rentals, Liberty Smart Security, and Kuma Outdoor Gear as well. Have a great finish to your weekend, folks, and we will chat again next week. Cheers. That's